This week's double parasha, Matot Maseh, brings the fourth book of the Torah, the book of Numbers, or Bamidbar, to a close. And I guess we should have recited the words that we recite when we finish the book, a book of the Torah, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. Be strong, and let all of us be strengthened. The journey through the wilderness is coming to an end. 40 years of massive challenges and trials for the people, crossing the sea, warfare, hunger and thirst, hostility from the nations whose lands they have had to traverse, uprisings and insurgencies, plagues, fire and earthquakes. No journey is ever straightforward, and the Israelites' march through the desert does not follow the crow's flight, but takes them southward, away from the land of Canaan, before they return northward towards the Jordan River. This itinerary feels a little like the journey we have all had to take over the past 16 months since the pandemic broke out in the early part of last year. And Rafe, your own experience of anticipating a return to the synagogue in order to celebrate your bar mitzvah, but having to self-isolate this week of all weeks, reminds us that life is not always straightforward. What we expect does not always come to fruition, and we are required to adapt to new and different circumstances. Rafe, I can't see you on the screen at the moment, but you have done this in a calm, mature, and accepting manner. I know you are not someone who is afraid of using technology, as you are something of a computer engineer yourself, having built your own computer, putting together its shell, its brain, and memory, which you described looking like a stick of chewing gum, webcam, and fan, all to your own specification. And I will just tell you, because you can't see it, I can see you, that's wonderful, that in the second row is sitting nearly 9-year-old Tristan with his mouth wide open when I just mentioned to him your accomplishments. So I must say that I, and I think all of us here in the sanctuary, am in awe of your ability to be able to conceive of it, let alone build it. I imagine Rabbi Igor will draw you onto his New Realities Committee meeting very shortly. Now, the Torah could have ended here at the end of the book of Numbers, leaving the Israelites and Moses on the steppes of Moab at the Jordan near Jericho. Then we could have bounced into the book of Joshua, passing over the announcement of the death of Moses, and resumed at the point in Joshua 1, where Moses' successor gives orders to the officials of the people to prepare themselves to enter the land. In the same set of orders, Joshua reminds the Reubenites and Gadites, the very people we met in your Torah portion, Rafe, of the compromise agreement to arm themselves, preparing themselves for battle, while leaving their families in the land they have chosen to be theirs on the eastern bank of the River Jordan. Instead, the Torah gives us another book of 34 chapters, a series of speeches by Moses as he reminds the Israelites of their 40-year sojourn in the desert and repeats many of the laws that have been stated earlier. Perhaps we can pause for a few moments as we conclude Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, and reflect on the space between the end of this book and the book of Devarim, the book of words, to use its Hebrew name, Deuteronomy. Numbers ends with a summary in one short verse. These are the commandments and regulations that the Eternal One enjoined upon the Israelites through Moses on the steppes of Moab at the Jordan near Jericho. It marks the end of the journey to the Promised Land, and the plains of Moab will be the setting for the next book, Deuteronomy, the place where Moses will pronounce his last teachings before he dies. And Deuteronomy begins almost identically. These are the words that Moses addressed to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan. But what I'm interested in is what occurs between these two verses, in the white space where one set of words comes to an end and another set begins. Rabbinic texts draw on mystical traditions about the very nature of the Torah scroll, its letters written in black ink, and the white parchment between each letter and paragraph and the edges of the parchment. In the beginning, it was taught, 2,000 years before heaven and earth, 7 things were created, and one of these was the Torah, written with black fire on white fire. For Nachmanides, the black fire are the letters written on the white fire, the white of the parchment. And both space and letters are considered as important as each other. The Talmud rules that every letter in a Torah scroll must be completely surrounded by parchment, in other words, white space. No one letter must touch another. Rav Kook, the first chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Palestine, who died in 1935, explains that the white parchment around the letters is an integral part of the Torah. Without it, the Torah scroll is unfit for use. In fact, says Rav Kook, the white space is a higher form of Torah. It is analogous to the white fire of Sinai, a sublime hidden Torah that cannot be read in the usual manner. Rabbi Avi Weiss offers another interpretation of the relationship between the black inked letters and the white space around them. The black fire, the letters, he says, represent the peshat, the literal, or perhaps more accurately, the plain meaning of the text. The white fire represents ideas that go beyond the plain meaning. In the white spaces, we bring our own ideas to the text when we interact with it. Interpretations, drashot, applications, and teachings that flow from the Torah. The drashot are the messages we read between the lines. The black letters are limited, limiting, and fixed. The white spaces go beyond the world of the intellect. The white spaces, he says, catapult us into the realm of the limitless and the ever-changing, ever-growing. They are the story, the song, the silence. So what do we see in this space between the end of Numbers and the beginning of Deuteronomy? Interestingly, the last verse of Numbers and the first verse of Deuteronomy begin with the same word, eleh, which means these. These are the mitzvot, the commandments in one, and these are the words in the other. And both verses are factual, rational, straightforward. The narrator locates them in a specific geographical space on the eastern side of the River Jordan, and both refer to the speaker, Moses. Numbers concludes a book that is full of danger, chaotic and mutinous behavior by the Israelites, Deuteronomy sets down the laws that are to become the framework for life as they settle in the land, religious and civil laws that are affirming and life-giving. Choose life that you and your descendants may live. But somewhere between the order and chaos, between submission and resistance, is this white space of silence. It is the space of stillness and questioning. Do I submit or do I rebel? Do I maintain silence or do I speak out? Am I an activist or am I a bystander? Do I want a peaceful and uninterrupted life, or do I want to see change and difference for the better? The white space appeals to our conscience. It allows us to halt our steps for a few moments, to reflect on the kind of world we inhabit, on those issues that trouble and disturb us: injustice, lack of compassion and hospitality, selfishness, unwillingness to build bridges with those who are not like us. But it also allows us to reflect on those things that fill us with a sense of gratitude and appreciation, the kindness of others, the beauty of our world, the achievements of young people. Rafe, I have been so impressed with your motivation and the maturity you have shown throughout the months I have known you. In these last days, you added to your Devar Torah words about Raphael Malach, someone who bears the same name as you, the young 12-year-old murdered in Auschwitz, who never reached his bar mitzvah, with whom you have chosen to be twinned. You share the same name, Raphael. God has healed. In space and time around preparing for your bar mitzvah, learning the Hebrew, and preparing to lead the service, you have taken us beyond the rational and practical aspects of your ceremony, the black fire, to something more intuitive and deeply compassionate. In recalling the memory of Raphael Malach, born in 1932 in Bedzin, Poland, who died in Auschwitz, you have created a memory, not the flat, rectangular, chewing gum memory of your home-built computer, but the memory of a young boy, a little younger than you, who suffered unimaginably and whose life came to an end because he was a Jew. If we live up to the essential meaning of our names, Raphael, God has healed, perhaps he was like you, Rafe, kind, caring, funny, intelligent, and mature. Perhaps, too, in the 1930s, he was passionate about football, and had he lived in our own time and in this place, I feel sure he would have uttered, along with his Shabbat and Bar Mitzvah prayers, a small prayer for the team he supports in the Euro final for tomorrow evening.